Okay, we are working on fruit trees again today. I know it's a bit breezy out here, so I'll try to talk a little louder. Hopefully that'll overcome the wind in the microphone. Sorry about any technical difficulties in advance. What I want to do today, you can see I'm here with some of my smaller fruit trees. This is an apple, the red delicious apple. I want to, oh, here we go with the wind, hang on. And what I want to do is I want to put fertilizer spikes around the trees. This is something that they recommend you do at least once a year. Some people say the spring is better, some people say the fall is better. Well, I couldn't do anything in the fall last year, even if I wanted to, because it was so wet and muddy. But here we are at the spring. It's early enough yet. Nothing's really, as you can see, nothing's really budded or flowered yet. So we will give these trees kind of an extra feed here with these plant food spikes, fertilizer spikes. The ones I'm using, I just got, I think these I got even at Walmart. They're just Miracle Grow brand. You can get Jobs or other varieties. They have some that I think are specific to fruit trees. You'd probably have to go to a, like an arborist place to find something like that, or maybe a larger store that would have more variety. I didn't have that option, so I just got the plain ones. They will help. Basically what this is time release fertilizer, and these spikes are just fertilizer tubes, or fertilizer spikes is what they call them, just pressed formed, that we're going to drive into the ground. And they give you this little plastic cap to set over top of them to pound on with a hammer, as opposed to try and drive them in. You'd break them all to pieces if you'd bang directly on them. So as long as your ground is relatively soft, it's not frozen anymore, that you can get them in the ground, that's what we're going to do. Now, what I'd recommend, and I will do before I do this, rather than before I start handling them, is I will put gloves on, because it is a fertilizer. Don't need that on my fingers, anything caustic or whatever. So it's probably a better idea to wear gloves when you're working around any kind of chemical fertilizers, and I will do that. And then it's just a simple process of, I'll take my small sledgehammer here and just pound them into the ground. Now, with these trees, since they are relatively small, I'm just going to put one spike at each tree. That's enough to feed them. When they get bigger, you have to add more. I'll show you that maybe a second part of the video. I'll go to my other larger fruit trees and show you how we do that. Essentially, what they say is put the spike about where the drip line of the tree would be. In other words, after it leaves, and if it were to rain, where in the perimeter around the tree would the water drip off the leaves. Now, with something this small, I'm not too worried about. I'll put it within a few feet of the main trunk. I won't put it right at the main trunk. I don't want the fertilizer to burn the roots. I want it to be absorbed into the soil and dilute itself in that sense with the ground, moisture in the soil, and then it will be absorbed over a period of time by the tree as it needs it. So that's the idea of the spikes, that they stay in the ground rather than just sprinkling fertilizer on or pouring some liquid into the ground. These are kind of like timed release. So I think they work pretty well. I've used them before. I try to use them every year if I can, just as part of my prep to get ready for the spring growing season. And this will boost the growth of the tree. Now, you don't want to do this like when the tree is in blossom or when it's fruiting and stuff like that. You want the fertilizer in the ground before the tree does its thing, so that the nutrients are there before that process begins. You don't want to fertilize anything when it's in blossom, because then it'll push it through the blossom stage quicker, and you don't want that. You want good pollination to be done before the blossoms fade, so you have more fruit. So what I'm going to do is do it now. It's still early enough in the spring to do it, and then it'll have plenty of time to use these spikes. Each tree will use these spikes up through the course of the year. I am going to put a couple around this old apple tree. As you can see, I did not do any pruning on that this year. This may be the last year for this. I'll try it. We'll see what it does. It started well last year with blossoms and apples started, and then with it being so wet and miserable, they all just shriveled up and rotted. So and the tree is getting more and more rotted around the base and less of it's alive. So I'll give it this year. If I get apples off it, great. If not, I'll cut it down and we'll try to replace it with something else. But I will put a couple spikes in to do what I can to help it produce this year, and we'll go from there. So I'll come back to you in just a minute here when I have my gloves on, and I'll show you basic. It should be pretty self-explanatory, but I'll show you how it's done. Now I've taken the first one and started it in the ground because I'm trying to do this one-handed and film. So there are tops and bottoms to these spikes. As you can see, it's kind of a pointed tip and then a blunt end. You want to put the pointed end in the ground just like you would a nail, and then the more blunt end this little cap fits on. And then basically just find your location. I'm about 2 feet away from the trunk here. I think that'll be sufficient. And then you just basically tap it right into the ground. I try to get it at least even with the grass so that there's nothing sticking up that I'd mow over or would be in the way in any way. I'll pound it down maybe even a little more. And then all I have to do is pull this cap back off just like that. And you can see it's now in the ground. Whoops, a piece came off there. So it's now in the ground and it'll start doing its thing. So I'll come back to you when I get to the bigger trees, but I've got the rest of these small ones up in here that I need to do. All right, I did all the smaller trees in the other part, the other field that only needed the one spike. Now I'm back to these larger trees that are closer to the house. And for these, I think they're about the size where I'll need 2. If I had a fully mature tree, I'd actually do 4, as they recommend, putting them maybe every 90 degrees around the tree. And that way you'd kind of have an even dispersal of fertilizer. But with these, I think they're okay, that I can just get away with 2 yet. But as I said, they suggest putting the spikes even with the perimeter of the drip line. Now if you look here, this branch sticks out about that far here, and if you look down, I have a spike laying there right around where that will end. And then on the other side of the tree here, if you look up, I've done about the same thing. And then I've got them laying out on the ground there by the peach tree, the cherry plum, and as you can see here, the two pear trees. And again, that seems far away from where the tree trunk is, but keep in mind that with most trees you have as much of a root system underground as you have growth above ground. So you can see this one has a major branch sticking out this far, and so I come down right about where that would end. May move it in just a little bit more, but and then they claim that's the optimal way to do it. So it's worked for me. I guess people know what they're talking about that produce these spikes, so we'll give it a try and see how this helps us this year. And this is my other apple tree here. Again, you can see I've got 2. I'm hoping that this year I have a good crop of fruit. Last year we started out really well, lots of blossoms. We survived not having a late frost to kill the blossoms, which was great. Started to have little green fruit growing, apples, peaches, etc. And then we got all that rain and everything just wilted. So hopefully this year, now I still have one hazard I have to get through, and that is a late frost. If we get nice weather early on and we get blossoms, frost will kill the blossoms, at least if it's a killing frost. So I've got to hope that these trees don't blossom too early, and that we end up with early blossoms that get killed off by a late frost. Usually around here, we're talking mid-May is the last possible frost overnight. As I've said before on my videos, we're at the bottom of a valley here, so we always get colder weather later because the cold air sinks down here, and it's a few degrees colder here than, say, up on top of the hill. So that is a concern, but hopefully, I know a few years ago all my blossoms froze and had no fruit, but I'm looking forward to maybe this year being the first good year of fruit off these trees. They've been in the ground now almost 5 years. They were about a 6-foot tall tree stalk when I bought them. The diameter of the trunks back then was maybe inch and a half. Now they're about 4 inches or 5 inches depending on the tree. So they have grown well. It's just I haven't gotten the benefits out of them yet. So, and especially that peach tree, we had lots and lots of peaches on there. Was it last year? And then they all rotted just because of all the rain and not being able to spray. So, and I know I wasn't alone. Many other farmers in our area, fruit producers, orchard producers, had the same problem. So hopefully this year we'll have a better year and we'll see what happens. So thank you for watching. I'm going to put these in the ground just like I did the others, nothing different. And please subscribe to our channel.